Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about the multi-prism camera, or simply the Prism camera. This is a large format, lenticular 3D portrait camera, and it shoots 8x10 film. In this video we'll talk about the history, and I'll give you some background on this camera, and then I'll show you the basic functions of how this camera works. The next few videos we'll do a deep dive into the lens assembly and the shutter mechanism. And then finally, we'll take a portrait. So join me now as we discuss the Prism camera. The idea for an instantaneous autostereoscopic camera using a large lens can be traced back to Frederick Ives and his patent for the parallax stereogram in 1903. The patent includes a diagram of his camera fitted with laterally inverting prisms, an important feature which we'll discuss later on. Lippmann's idea of the integral image opened the door to the concept of multiple views in autostereoscopic pictures. Louis Chiron was the first to suggest using the large diameter lens to record multiple views. This is an adaptation of Frederick Ives and Eugene Estenov's parallax stereogram cameras. Herbert Ives, the son of Frederick Ives, wrote an article on his experiments with a large diameter lens in 1930. He cites the French mathematician Bissier's 1925 patent. Ives patented his results, but it would be years later until a commercial model was designed. In the late 1940s, Maurice Bonnet's company, La Reloyal Photographie, designed their own camera called the OP-22. The late 1940s, when Harvey, Prever, and Paul Hesse were sourcing equipment from Bonnet, they came across his patents for the Prism camera, which hadn't been fully developed yet. They began to design their own version with the help of Dr. Gustave Facen, who designed the Argus 35mm camera. They began to test the pilot model of the Prism camera around 1952 and produced several portraits and advertising displays. They refined the pilot model and produced a number of cameras for use in portrait studios across the country. The enterprise was short-lived, however, as it ran into the same troubles that plagued Vitavision. Namely, the portraits couldn't be retouched. There was also the issue of adjusting the prisms, which required Harvey to fly out and swap out the lens.
One day, I'm on layoff again too, Aircraft World, you know. He called me up and he said, Larry, he says, would you come down here? He says, I want you to restore these Prism cameras. And he had 4 of them himself, and he brought out, he had in storage, and I had no idea he had any in storage there. Like I say, he's tight mouth, he won't say nothing. Just all of a sudden, oh, there it is, you know. So he had them in big crates, and he brought them out. And he told me, he said, Larry, he says, I want you to restore these back to functioning so I can sell them. He said, I don't want a Cadillac. He said, I know what you he said, just make them work. I said, okay. So I started going through them, and I had to lubricate a lot of stuff. Some of the springs in it I had to readjust, and just all kinds of stuff. And then finally, we got down to the lenses. Now, these lenses are huge. They're about this wide and about that thick. The lenses originally are round, but they cut the top off and the bottom off because all we need is a center section. It gets rid of a lot of weight. And so, he wanted to make sure that he was there with me. And he said, I know you want to see what's inside this aluminum box. It was an aluminum, the outside it was square, you know, where the lens was mounted inside. And so he wanted all that cleaned up internally. So, okay, so we opened it up, and geez, I checked out, there are 2 lenses in there, and one's got a short focal length, the other one's got about a 8-foot focal length on it. And the 2 of them combined together, it changes it down to a shorter focal length. And then in front of the lenses, there's 20 or 21 prisms, and when you take a 3D image in a regular 3D camera, like in a Realist 3D, you have to take the transparencies and switch them. Because if you don't, the image will, when something is supposed to be popping out, my hand will come backwards. And anything that's in the background will pop out forward. They call it pseudo. Pseudo. It's the opposite of, I guess, is what would the definition be. I was really amazed, you know, at everything I'm seeing, you know, and naturally I took pictures of everything and all that kind of stuff. And then the Prism cameras, there were at least 10 of them. And when I was out there restoring these things, they make them functional. Well, him and I think George Skelly was there, and they were over there working with these two Prism cameras that were very early models. There were things about them he didn't like, I didn't like either, but he scrapped them out. Kept the lens, but he took the cameras and basically chopped them up and threw them in the big gondola. I had no idea that's what he was doing. I was over there working on this stuff over there, and that's too bad. As far as I know, there's 8 Prism cameras left. I have 2 of them. Tim has 1. David Berger, I'm not sure. I think he's got more than 1. And I've heard that he's had 3, because he probably wanted to set up a portrait thing like that. And so I don't know the true situation with him, why he never continued with him.
So this camera was given to me by the family of Robert Vance after he passed away. I first met Robert in 2014 through my good friend and mentor, Larry Wyatt. Larry and Robert had been friends for a very long time, going back to when they both knew and worked with Harvey Prever. Robert invited Larry and myself to his home in Los Angeles, and we got to see his collection of cameras and images. And through that, I developed a correspondence with Robert, and he helped answer a lot of questions about lenticular, and is a very supportive guy. Also, Robert wrote an article for Stereo World magazine called The Lenticular Legacy of Harvey Prever. And I'll leave a link in the description below so you can check out that article online. So without further ado, let's check out the Prism camera and see how it functions. Okay, now we're at the back of the camera, and it should be noted that this is a studio portrait camera. You wouldn't want to take it out to Death Valley and shoot landscapes. The camera is made of wood, and starting from the top down, we have our rangefinder and our viewfinder. The rangefinder consists of 2 mirrors that once you establish the subject focus in the ground glass, you can set the rangefinder. And there's 2 adjustment screws inside the camera. And let me show you the rangefinder windows. I removed the screws earlier on the top here, and this will give you a view of the mirrors right here. And let me put this guy back very carefully. Like that. So again, the rangefinder and the viewfinder. And I don't use the rangefinder because I do use a different method with the ground glass. But the viewfinder definitely comes in handy for composing your shots. So next we have the ground glass and the film holder. So let me pull out the film holder like that. And this film holder takes 8x10 film, and it has a pressure back. And I'll show you how to load the film in another video. So the ground glass is pretty much like a standard 8x10 camera. You can actually just focus with the ground glass. You don't really need these two options. They're nice if you're going to use them, but like I said, I just use the viewfinder. You can compose your shots, focus your shots, and establish the stereo window, which will be the subject of our next video. So let me take this panel off, and I'll show you a look inside the camera. All right, I've removed the back panel, and now we have access to inside the camera. And from here, we can make adjustments to the rangefinder mirrors. And if I crank this shutter, we can see prisms. Like so. Okay, now we have a side view of the camera, and from here, we can control our movements through these hand cranks. And let me show you how this works. The back crank here controls the tilt of the camera. Let me show you. Okay, moving on from the tilt, we have the focusing knob, and this just moves the camera back and forth to help with our focus. So we can move it back like that. And now we have our raise and lower control, which is this big wheel right here. And there is a lock on the camera. So if I unlock it, now I'll be able to lower the camera. Or raise it. We have our shutter here, and then our shutter release trigger here. And I'll show you this in the next video. Next, going down, we have our base, which is supported by three wheels at each of these corners. And we have our brake, which locks the camera in place. Thanks for watching part 1. In the next video, we'll talk about the lens assembly and the shutter mechanism. And until then, take care.